Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast. The Knicks have officially clinched a spot in the playoffs. We'll tell you why a top 3 seed is looking good and who their first round opponent might be.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, and today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150. Win or lose. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. I want to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, because you're now available on all platforms. That includes on YouTube. So if you want to see our smiling faces, and they are smiling because the Knicks are officially in the playoffs, which, Alex, I don't know if you remember, there was this time in the distant past, before the internet, where that was not a guarantee. But the Knicks are locked into the playoffs. If you want to hear us talk about it every single day, remember to subscribe on YouTube, hit that notifications bell to ensure you never miss an episode, and hit the auto download function on your podcast platform of choice to make sure you can listen to us on the go. But who would you be hearing? I'm Gavin, Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster, big time lacrosse game. You can check that out on Varsity Media today. He's Alex Wolfe, editor-in-chief of the Strickland, the greatest Knicks website in the whole wide world. You can check them out on all forms of social media at thestrick.land. New podcast coming from your boy last night, Alex. What were you recording the other night on the Strickland?
I was just doing a wrestling show of all things, talking about WrestleMania for the Strickland. So yeah, fun time.
I'd like maybe not the best summer for it with the shoulder injury, but Julius Randle to make a WWE appearance at some point would be good. A great heel for Knicks fans and fans of other teams alike. But that's not what we're here to talk about. The Knicks, with a couple of games going their way, have officially ducked the play-in. They are guaranteed a top 6 seed. And Alex, we're about to get into it, but are looking pretty good at locking into the 3 seed, which I think we'd both agree is the best possible position for the Knicks. Though I know some people push back on that and want the Knicks to get all the way up to 2. Personally, I'm content. Obviously, the Sixers can still get to 6, and maybe 2 would get you the Pacers. And then I agree it's the best scenario. I would rather 3 and the Pacers than 2 and having to take on the Sixers or Heat. So I'm pretty excited about where the Knicks are at right now.
Yeah, I'm cool with it. I mean, so they passively lock up their playoff spot, their guarantee of a top 6 seed by the Heat losing last night, which then puts the Heat at 36 losses, the Knicks at 32 losses with only 3 games left. So it's now mathematically impossible for them to end up that low. And they hold the tiebreaker with the Sixers. So even if the Knicks lose out, they would have the tiebreaker with the Sixers, thus securing their spot, which is great. And as far as the 3 seed, yeah, I mean, so the main thing here is, when you look at, because we pulled up the schedules of all the teams surrounding the Knicks, and we're going to go over them in a minute. But the big thing with the Knicks here is that all they have to do is essentially just control their own destiny at this point. Like, they're going to have Boston tonight, which will be interesting to monitor the injury report for that. If you've looked at it already, the Celtics have basically listed their entire roster as questionable going into today. I think they're doing that just to cover their butts so that they can pick and choose who they want to rest tonight. I don't know that they'll necessarily rest the whole team. That said, I don't know. I'm still putting my conspiracy theory hat on. I think that they have maybe a vested interest in keeping the Knicks away from the 4 seed. I mean, it just seems like everybody is looking at the Knicks in the NBA and saying, this is not the team. This is the team that I want to defer playing as long as possible, because they're going to be really annoying and they're going to beat us down. I mean, the Knicks have had their own injury concerns this year, so there might be some, calculus there. If you're another team saying, I don't want to face them fully healthy in the first round or maybe even the second round, let's give things some time, to get to the, the conference finals or whatever. If this team goes on a run, then maybe they'll be banged up a little bit and we'll have a better chance. I don't know. That would be my calculus on it, but I'm also a Knicks fan and I love how this team plays. And, I believe in the grit and everything that they play with. And, I believe in my heart of hearts that no team wants to face them. But the Knicks basically are in a position where they completely control their own destiny at this point. They like all their games outside of the Boston one, which isn't consequential for the overall standings because Boston locked up the 1 seed long ago. But like all their games have no impact on anyone else. Like they're not facing any of the other teams in the top 6, other than Boston in this game. But otherwise, like other teams have, very consequential matchups. Like the Magic, especially, are facing 2 teams for their last 2 games that are very much in the thick of it with them. The Pacers face Cleveland. I'm trying to think here. The Sixers, they face Orlando. Like, I mean, that's basically the picture. Like there's a lot of action between the Bucks, the Cavs, the Magic, the Pacers. There's like a lot of cross play there that comes into play. Whereas the Knicks, if they just win out, they're a 50-win team. And like, if the Bucks don't win out, then there's a decent chance that the Knicks could snatch that 2 seed. But at the very least, I think the Knicks are most likely, going to hold on to that 3 seed. They can maybe afford to lose 1 game, but if they don't, it's essentially theirs. Like they lock in minimum the 3 seed at this point.
Yeah, so I want to circle back to that Celtics point and why they might be incentivized to sit everyone. So even if you're of the perspective, like we're going to end this episode ranking everyone we want the Knicks to play. Like if I was doing that from a Celtics perspective, I would guess they still fear a healthy version of the Bucks more than anyone, and that's probably like if we're like you were putting on your Knicks hat, if I'm putting on my objective NBA fan hat, I think the Bucks are probably the only team they think could actually beat them in a 7-game series, assuming like neither team suffers any injuries. I would say that's the team they fear the most. The teams they probably fear the next most post the Julius Randle injury, Miami, just because they so have the Celtics number at this point. And then maybe the Sixers, just because Joel Embiid is kind of like, obviously Jalen Brunson could potentially be the best player in a series with the Celtics. I think Embiid is the guy who would have the clearest cut case to be, even though he has not necessarily shown that. So I in the playoffs, at least, I understand why people would push back on that. The thing is, the Sixers and the Heat have no bearing on the Knicks at this point, right? They have no chance to catch the Knicks. So if you're the Celtics, you're saying, all right, who's going to give Milwaukee the most trouble as a top 3 seed? Seems clearly to be the Knicks, the way Cleveland is faltering right now. Who's going to batter them? And to your point, like, who do we like just not want to have to deal with in the second round? Like, I think it's a pretty ideal scenario for Boston to get any of the 3 of Cleveland, Orlando, or Indiana in the second round. Like, I just don't really see a world where any of those series are competitive. Like, if Cleveland totally flips things, gets their act together, sure, that could be a little bit interesting. I think Boston has zero fear in their heart for those teams, and I think they know with the Knicks, to your point, like if nothing else, they are going to get a hell of a battle, and they're going to come out of that series the worse for the wear, even if it only ends up being 5 games or something. So I think that's Boston's perspective on it. There's one more. Second segment, we can do like a slightly deeper dive on all the scenarios, but I think one more important thing to note, with Atlanta losing last night, the Bulls now, if they just beat one of the Pistons or the Wizards, they are locked into a home game in that 9-10 play-in, and they'll have nothing to play for in a Sunday, April 14th game at MSG. It'll be interesting to see how many guys they sit, because their mentality might be like, hey, we just want to keep a rhythm. And this could actually backfire on the Knicks, where they could, if they beat the Pistons tonight, they could just sit guys against the Wizards on the back end of a back-to-back and then play everyone against the Knicks just to be in as good of a rhythm as possible. So that's sort of an open question, because we've seen the Bulls, unfortunately, are capable of beating the Knicks, are capable of playing with the Knicks. So that could ultimately, like if the Celtics do sit everyone tonight, that might weirdly be the Knicks' most challenging game. Or Chicago could go the other way and say, hey, we're not risking anything. We're just going to sit absolutely everyone against the Wizards and against the Knicks. Or they lose to the Pistons tonight somehow, and they have to play people against the Wizards and then don't against the Knicks.
Yeah, I guess we'll see how that all goes. And I think we ought to get into a more in-depth breakdown of the schedules of the rest of the teams facing the Knicks, and then of course, or facing the Knicks in the standings, I should say. And then, of course, pick who we want to face in these playoff rounds and where we want the Knicks to end up and all that good stuff in just a second when we get back.
But first, are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drives and great escapes. Class exclusive Google built in as your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store are built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect midsize crossover for your next adventure. The 2024 Nissan Pathfinder has room for up to 8 and expansive cargo capacity and advanced available 4x4 capability. With 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds towing, when adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. So take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. All right, Alex, let's run through the remaining scenarios. So just so we have everything clear on the Knicks remaining schedule is at Boston, Brooklyn at home, Chicago at home. Right now, a little website that has been extremely useful if you're following all this, called, I think it's I for some reason did not write it down here. Playoffstatus.com. There we go. Has the Knicks at a 52% shot at the 3 seed. And I think that might actually be quite low because I don't think it's taking into account the possibility that Boston will probably sit the bulk of their starters tonight. And I don't know if it's taking into account that Chicago potentially could be sitting the bulk of their starters in that final game.
Yeah, and I found that to be interesting, especially because they have the Cavaliers as a 19% chance of potentially leaping up to the 2 seed, which I don't find to be particularly likely, but I guess we'll see. I do think there's a really good chance that the Knicks end up sweeping these final 3 games. It kind of, again, all comes down to Boston. Like, do they want to show up to play or do they want to rest everybody? If they rest everybody, like, they're an extremely talented team, but they're not the deepest team, because they've invested a lot in building that crazy talented, core that they have, obviously, of all the stars. So, like, if Holiday, Porzingis, Brown, and Tatum are all out, and even let's say if they still leave Al Horford and Tillman active, like, things are looking pretty good for the Knicks there. I think that they could pull that one out, even if those guys come out and try as hard as they can. And then Brooklyn, like, forget about it. I mean, I guess Brooklyn is still sort of trying to win games, maybe because they want to minimize the loss of their draft pick this year. So maybe that's their motivation, but maybe Mikal Bridges, hooks his boys up and takes a dump real quick and lets them win that game. And then Chicago, like you said, there's a chance they end up just resting everybody. I mean, I think given the fact that Chicago has already dealt with all the injuries that they have this year, and then just had Andre Drummond turn his ankle against the Knicks the other night, like, I think if they have everything locked in and they're already set for that number 9 spot, and that's all they can do, which would be the case, then I don't see why they would risk anything and why they wouldn't just want to rest guys, especially because they're not, for a team that's like just on the cusp, they're not exactly a young team. Like, all their guys are older, guys, like all around like 30 years old, whatever. Like, they're going to want that little bit of rest before hopping into the play-in and, getting a chance to potentially win that 8 seed. But yeah, let's look at some of the other teams. So we have the Magic first, who were the biggest nemesis to the Knicks as of like 2 days ago. And yet now are not looking particularly great in this whole scenario. So they just lost to Milwaukee, which pushed them down the standings. They're now in the 5th spot below the Cavaliers. But then they closed their season out at Philadelphia and then versus Milwaukee at home. Philly is on a 6-game win streak right now and are looking really good. They have Joel Embiid back. They're trying their best to get out of the play-in as well. So I don't really like the Magic's chances there, especially on the road. And then they've got Milwaukee again, and they just lost to Milwaukee. Now, granted, for Knicks purposes, if you want the Knicks to potentially jump into the 2 seed, you really want them to win that game. And you also have OKC facing the Bucks in their next game as well. The Bucks are going to end their season on the road at OKC and at Orlando. So I guess in an ideal world, you kind of want Philly to beat the Magic, and then you want the Magic to beat Milwaukee in the final game of the season, and you want OKC to beat Milwaukee. Then if the Knicks win out, then they're the 2 seed. So that's like, I guess, the first and pretty much only scenario that you need as a Knicks fan to get that 2 seed, because if the Bucks win one more game, then that's out of the question for the Knicks.
Yeah, and I know I mentioned already, but I personally don't particularly want the Knicks to be the 2 seed. Like look, there's a chance it works out because Philly still has an outside chance to get to 6. I think if they win both and Indiana loses both, they're there. I would much rather face the Pacers. Like, to me, that is far more important than having home court advantage in a hypothetical second round series against the Bucks. I don't know, Alex. I think previously you were a little bit more into the idea of going up to 2 than me. Is that, if I'm remembering correctly, is that still your stance on it, or do you think 3 is pretty ideal for the Knicks at this point?
I mean, if I'm looking at it logically, I think 3 is better. If I'm looking at it just from like a hubris standpoint and wanting to, have my team be as high as possible and, have bragging rights and stuff, like, then I think I like the 2 seed. But yeah, I do agree. Like, I think, well, I guess it depends on how the chips fall too. Like, if the Sixers manage to pull it off and hop up to the 6 seed, then that would not be fantastic.
Yeah, that would work out. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, that would not be fantastic if the Knicks hold at 3 then. But if it's a choice of like the Sixers or Heat versus the Pacers or the Magic, like, yeah, I'll take the Pacers or Magic all day. I just think they're less experienced. The Knicks, regardless of what their season record was against the Magic, thanks to, the Magic just catching them like with like 3 games in the course of like 2 weeks, when the Knicks were at their lowest point as far as the injuries and stuff, like, I think, the Knicks would definitely win that series. I mean, the Magic are good, but they're just not, they're young, they're unproven. The Knicks know what they're doing in the playoffs. Like, I think at this point it all just depends on who's going to end up in the 6 versus the 7. But I think I would probably prefer the 3 seed at this point if things hold relatively to form of what they are right now. The big variable there being if the Sixers manage to jump up to the 6 seed, then that becomes much less attractive to be the 3 seed, I think. But at least you get home court, which is good.
Yeah, and Philly like has a decent. I mean, that Sixers Magic game is like we're gonna know so much more after that one. And it's a weird thing where, like, for the 3 seed, like, nominally good insurance for the Sixers to win that, and at the same time, you kind of want the Sixers like as far away from you as possible. But I don't know. Do you want to just get into it now, like ranking our potential opponents?
Yeah, we may as well. So I guess, do we want to? We may as well just avoid the 8 seed, right? Because there's no point in talking about it. So Bulls Hawks can get scrapped.
Yeah.
But then as far as the 7 seed, Sixers or the Heat, if whoever ends up winning that matchup, and I guess for the moment we'll just sort of assume that things will hold form as much as possible. But if it was between the Sixers or the Heat, crazy as it sounds to say based off how last year went, I think I would rather have the Heat than the Sixers. Just because the Sixers are coming on. They've got Joel Embiid back. He seems like a man on a mission. They're heating up big time. He's about as fresh as he's ever going to be going into the playoffs. I mean, he did have to rehab an injury, but, he's had a good runway here. So yeah, I guess like I would still rather some of the, so I'll start even lower. I think the number 1 team that I would want to face in the first round is honestly the Magic. And that's not a slight on them, but it's just a byproduct of their inexperience, the fact that they're so young. The fact that part of it is petty revenge. I want to get revenge for them winning those games and getting the tiebreaker and everything else this year, but and prove that the Knicks are a better team than the Magic are. But also they scare me less because of having less experience. And for that reason, even though they'll finish higher than say the Sixers or Heat, they don't have that playoff medal yet. And I think they're my number 1 team that I would want to face for the Knicks.
Yeah, so I want to get into my number 1 team in just a sec, because I'll spoil it. I actually agree with you. And I think I've seen a lot of people out there who are disproportionately scared of the Magic. And I'm like a young Harry Potter out here. I'm saying, bring the Magic on. We'll get into that in just a sec on Locked On Knicks.
But first, we got to remind you that this show is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel, and it's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. You can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. And let me tell you guys right now, I was checking out the futures here for the NBA championship, and your New York Knicks are at a plus 3,900 on FanDuel right now. That's a pretty solid bet, I think. If I'm not mistaken, that means a $10 bet would win you $390. And hey, why not at this point? I think the Knicks are as healthy as they're going to be. They're getting tuned up. They're starting to look really good. The Anunoby era, if you want to put some stock into these numbers, they have only lost 3 games compared to 17 wins with OG Anunoby so far. So as long as he stays healthy, if that holds up, they'll win the championship. So I guess we'll see. But why not? It's always nice to put a little money down on your favorite team. And then if things work out, you have 2 reasons to cheer. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Gavin, we're back in, continuing to break down our favorite and least favorite opponents to run into in these playoffs. And I made my case. Make your case. Why should the Magic be our #1 objective here?
All right, so I'm just going to zoom out for 1 sec because I realized we didn't put up this graphic yet. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see it. The playoffstatus.com percentages. So the Knicks, 53% chance at a 3 seed. Again, we think that's a little higher given the Celtics could sit everyone. 32 at a 4, 7 at a 5, 3% at a 6. And then in terms of most likely matchups, the Pacers, 46% chance at a 6 seed. So almost a coin toss that if the Knicks get to 3, they will see the Pacers there. Decent chance, though, that the Sixers get there at 26%. Smaller chance, but still possible. You get the Cavs, you get the Magic in that game. All right. I just said it, but I would most want to play Orlando. I think they are an incredibly good defensive team. And there's a feeling out there that they could even lean further into lineups that get more shooting on the floor without giving up what makes them special this year. To me, where they're just not all that scary yet is none of their guys have been like playoff blooded. Like it's literally Joe Ingles and Jonathan Isaac losing a couple of first round series and watching some from the bench when he was injured. And I think Paolo Banchero is going to be a transcendent multi-time first All-NBA type of star. I don't really see him there yet. And I think the only way Orlando ultimately wins that series is if Banchero is better than Jalen Brunson. And the way both of them are playing right now, like I just don't see it, especially because the Knicks have one of the better options in the entire NBA to throw at Banchero in a healthy OG Anunoby. 48 minutes of great rim protection, health pending between Mitchell Robinson and Isaiah Hartenstein. Like they are like, I think those games would be ugly. And you'd have a bunch of games where there's 2 minutes left on the clock and it's like 88, 85 Knicks. But I'm going to say 4 out of 5 times the Knicks are going to win that game. I just think Jalen Brunson is far and away the best closer on the floor. Yes, Orlando has a pretty good option to throw at him in Jalen Suggs. Yes, they can put Jonathan Isaac on Anunoby. Like they're going to be tough matchups there for the Knicks as well. I think I just have a lot more faith in the Knicks between Brunson and just their sheer experience, Alex, executing down the stretch of those games than I do the Magic have executed. If I'm wrong, so be it, because that is a possibility for the Knicks. The second team I'd want the Knicks to face is the Pacers. And I think I'm curious if you're going to push back on this, but I think most people have the Cavs either at second or first on this list. And even though Cleveland is pretty clearly playing the worst out of any of these teams right now, and it is seemingly falling apart before our eyes, I still have just enough respect for the sheer talent they have on their roster and just the possibility of Donovan Mitchell, like flat out, like figuring it out from a health perspective and being the best player in any given series versus Tyrese Halliburton, who, I mean, similar to Mitchell, is coming into this series injured. And I just don't think the secondary talent on the Pacers is as good as it is on the Cavs, even if we have very recent proof of concept of the Knicks just having the Cavs number.
Yeah, I guess the only worry there is the Siakam factor. Like they did add a guy who has playoff experience to their team, and all that. So I mean that's dangerous. That said, like, yeah, I think I'm with you. I think I'd rather have the Pacers. The Knicks played them really well this year. I mean, they played the Cavs really well too. So it's almost a coin toss between these two for me. Like I would feel fairly confident against both. I guess the main thing with the Pacers is just they play that like fast style of ball that just does not translate to the playoffs usually. And I think that when it would come down to it and they would be forced to settle into a half court offense for 40 possessions in a row against the Knicks and just deal with the beating that the Knicks were going to hand them, I don't think it would work out too well for them. That's just not where Halliburton thrives. It's not where that team thrives. They thrive more on transition and all that. So I think that's the main factor that sort of says to me, like, I think I'd rather have the Pacers than the Cavs, but then I'd rather have the Cavs next. Because I don't know if we have to explain it too much. All you have to do is just go back and watch last year's series where the Knicks pummeled them and Jared Allen said the lights were too bright and all that good stuff. Like not much has changed between now and then, clearly, as we've seen when the Knicks faced the Cavs this year. So I think the Cavs are the team that I want next. Pretty point blank period. I mean, I think the Knicks would have a great chance of beating them. And if there was some way that the Knicks could end up facing them like in the second round or something too, that would be great too. But there's no way that's going to happen. So yeah, if they somehow end up their first round opponent, that would be great.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not likely, but the Cavs have a 19% shot at the 2 right now, 16% shot at the 3. So if Milwaukee loses out and the Knicks and Cavs win out,
is the ideal that the Magic make it to the 6 seed and then the Cavs somehow jump the Knicks to the 2 seed? That would be pretty awesome.
That'd be cool. I mean, that'd feel like Eastern Conference Finals. Here we go. And then if the Knicks lose to the Magic, it would just make it more painful. But we don't have to talk about that right now. But that is probably our most fun scenario. And then you touched on it a little bit, so I'll just wrap us up by saying that I would rather. I think I disagree with you. I'd rather play the Sixers than the Heat. Like the Heat just still have me spooked a little bit, even though they haven't played like it down the stretch. I do think they are probably better than last year, with the important caveat that Bam Adebayo is in the weirdest funk this season, and I don't really know what it is, but he has not been the same guy. Like even last night, like in a pretty important game for Miami against the Mavericks, he went 3 for 13. Jimmy Butler maybe is a year worse. So there's cases to be made that's an easier matchup this time around. But I just think between Jaime Jaquez, Terry Rozier, healthy Tyler Hero, they're just deeper. They're a little bit more talented versus the Sixers. Like the Knicks have just played them well for the most part at this season. And like, I can't get that first game against them with Anunoby out of my mind, where the Knicks just completely ran away from them. Granted, like Embiid kind of got shook up in that game, but he still had like 30 and 10, and the Knicks just wrecked them. And I think they have some decent options to throw at Maxey between Deuce McBride, like if Anunoby needs to take that matchup, if like DiVincenzo gets some minutes in that matchup. I just don't think the Sixers quite have the depth. Like there's obviously a world where like the Knicks just can't stop Embiid, and as good as Hartenstein and Mitch are, like that's always a possibility. But I'm a little bit more worried about the Heat. Like I don't really want that smoke in the playoffs. Like maybe the Heat fans will get in our comment and make fun of me. Like I think it's very much a series that Knicks could win. Like I just think you almost know going in, it's coming down to a game 7, last few minutes. It's like, all right, is Jimmy Butler going to make more shots, or is Jalen Brunson going to make more shots? Philly, I kind of think the Knicks would just beat them, but I mean, both those series are really tough for the Knicks.
Yeah. I mean, I feel thankful that the Knicks are in a position where it's most likely that they don't end up facing one of those two teams. Obviously, depending on how things go with the Sixers Magic game. So, gonna sort of be rooting for the Magic, I think, in that game, to be like, keep the Sixers down there. Let's not worry about them. At least not until a potential second round series. If I were the Bucks, I'd be certainly rooting for the Sixers to win that game, because I wouldn't want to have anything to do with the Sixers or the Heat in the first round as the 2 seed. I think I've come around. I think I'm now over the pride of it all, and I'm like just letting the sensible part of my brain go at this point. And I'm with you. Like, I don't want anything to do with those 2 teams. I would much rather face either the less experienced, less accomplished teams like the Magic or Pacers, or just the team that we already know the Knicks can beat in the Cavs. I think that sounds much more comfortable to me in the first round. And I think that's where I come down ultimately on this whole thing is bring on one of the 3 teams that's already at the 4, 5, 6, and keep those 2 that are at 7, 8 out of my bracket for now.
It's kind of crazy to think, and we can wrap up on this. The Knicks are likely to finish the season with about 15 less wins than the Celtics. And because the NBA, and I think this is very stupid, does not have a rule where you can pick your first round opponent, the Knicks might actually have a more ideal path through the playoffs than the Celtics if things work out correctly, which I think is insane. As a Knicks fan, I love it. And we'll wrap up on that. We'll know a lot more after tonight. We'll have you covered post game. But until then, he's Alex. I'm Gavin, and we'll talk to you very, very soon on Locked On Knicks.